Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all. Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and today I'm going to be reviewing my 35th Stephen King book, The Green Mile. In case you're new here, I am on a journey to read all of Stephen King's books by publication date. So I started with Carrie, and now I'm all the way up to The Green Mile. Now, this was originally published in they call it serials, so a bunch of short stories, but this is a collection of all of them together. So The Green Mile is about a man named Paul Edgecombe, and he is an officer at a jail, a penitentiary, a state penitentiary. And where he works in the prison is an area that they call the Green Mile, and this is where they keep the prisoners who are about to be put to death. The time period of this book is like 1930s. This was a period of time where a lot of people were put to death, and specifically by the electric chair. So they call the electric chair Old Sparky. This is where they keep all the prisoners, the worst of the worst, etc., etc. Now, one day there is this man that is brought in, this man, John Coffey, and he is like this giant guy, super, super big, super buff, super very, when you look at him, he's very scary and intimidating. And he has been brought to the Green Mile. He has been brought in to be put to death for allegedly kidnapping, killing, and doing other horrible things to two young girls. However, as the story continues, Paul starts to know John on a personal level, and he starts to realize that things may not be as they seem. And what starts to happen, and what this book is really about, I think at its core, is Paul starts to struggle with both what he sees, what he knows in his heart. All his beliefs are shaken because of John. Everything that he thinks, that he knows about the way of the world changes because of John, and it is an incredible story. I'm being very vague. There was a movie based on this book starring Tom Hanks. It's an older movie, so I'm sure a lot of people have already seen it and you already are aware of what happens, but in case you're not, I am going to do non-spoilers in this video. However, if you want to do spoilers, or if you want me to do maybe like a movie versus book type thing, definitely let me know in the comments section below. So let's start with the world building of the Green Mile, the world of the Green Mile. First, I think this takes place in a very interesting time period. Like the 30s, I think it's 1932 specifically, is when the majority of the story takes place. And it's very interesting to try and put yourself in the mind frame of someone during that time. Because the things that were going on in the country, even the concept of putting someone to death via electric chair just feels like a very foreign concept. So that feels like a very foreign concept. There's also the fact that John Coffey, the big guy that comes into the prison, is a black man. And of course, again, at that time in the country, anyone that sees him, anyone that meets him, automatically makes a snap judgment about him because of how he looks. Because he's this huge guy, he looks like he could snap your neck like a twig, and he is a black man. So him being convicted for, torturing and killing these two little white girls, it's not a good look. It's not a good look. Stephen King does such a great job really bringing the atmosphere of this prison to life. First of all, the actual prison itself, the hallways, the cells, the way that they're designed, it's meant to be this hopeless place because this is where people come to die. And I feel like you really feel that through his writing. And the way that he describes even the whole concept of the electric chair, what Paul and his fellow officers have to do to prepare for someone to go in the chair, what it would feel like for a prisoner to actually have to sit down and be electrocuted, what it would feel like to be in the audience on the other side of the glass that's watching this happen. King just does such a good job bringing these things to life and really making you feel like you're there and like you're in the story. And this is something that King, I think, does really well in a lot of his books. The other thing that King does really, really well is characters. I love Stephen King specifically because of his character development, because of his characters. And there are so many great characters in this book. There's also some horrible characters in this book. Not that they're horribly written, but that they are horrible people. So let's start with Paul, our main character. The whole story is more or less told from Paul's point of view. And again, in the beginning of the story, Paul is very a straight-laced type character. He's very by the book. He knows who he is. He knows what his job is. Like, he just is very set in his ways and comfortable with his place in the world. But when he meets John, that all starts to change, because John, even though he's this big guy, this big, scary black man, John has the mind of a child. They very quickly realize that John appears to be mentally very, very simple. And Paul starts to wonder, like, how can this guy who acts like he wouldn't hurt a fly, how could he have done this terrible thing? And as the story starts to unfold, you start to realize, again, like I said earlier, that there is more to the story here. One of the other things I like about this book is that it's really grounded in reality. There is a supernatural element at play here. However, it's very subtle, and it's very subtle. And in a lot of King's books, it's very in your face. He's done monsters and all this kind of stuff, and there is a supernatural element here, but it's very subtle, and it's a source of good instead of being like a source of evil or a maleficent force. So Paul really goes on a journey in this book. He really goes on a journey from, again, from having his beliefs tested, to having his beliefs shaken, to having to make decisions that no person should have to make ever in their lives. Like, Paul really goes through both a physical journey, an emotional journey, a mental journey, and we're along for the ride with him. So I think that's one of the reasons that makes this book like really connect with people. And then there's John himself. John will just break your heart. He will break your heart because, again, once you get to know John and you know who he is, you know what he can do, you know why he's there, like what his purpose is in this story. And it's both incredibly sad, incredibly touching, incredibly horrifying at the same time. Again, this is something that King does so well. He takes the horror of everyday life, the horror of what people do to each other, the horror of the discrimination people have against each other, the horror of people making the wrong decisions and in this case, making a wrong decision could be the difference between life and death. And that is horrifying. It's horrifying. And John, and meeting John, learning about John and who he is, it will break your heart by the end. It will break your heart. So the plot of this book, like I mentioned, is really about Paul and John. It's about Paul having his beliefs shaken, having his mind changed. But there's a lot of other stuff that goes on in the plot too. And there's just a couple things I want to mention, some of the highlights for me personally. While this story is going on, there are a couple other people that are, in other cells in the Green Mile. And one of them in particular ends up making friends with a little mouse, because there's a mouse in the prison, and they find this mouse, or one of the inmates finds this mouse and kind of trains this mouse to do tricks. And there's like a whole plot line with this mouse, which sounds bizarre, because how does that fit into the story? But you have to read it to understand. So let me just say that I have never in my life felt so upset about a mouse than I felt during this story. So trigger warning if animal harm is something that affects you. There is some of that in here. However, I will say that it does turn out okay in the end. It does turn out okay, even though there's some pretty horrible things that happen. Another horrible thing that happens is there is a pretty graphic scene of someone in the electric chair. I don't want to mention what happens in the story specifically, but let's just say that there is a particular inmate and one of Paul's fellow officers purposely messes up the way that they're supposed to be electrocuted. Basically, what is supposed to happen is you flip the switch, they get electrocuted, they die. But something in their setup goes awry on purpose, and when the switch is flipped, instead of the person just kind of quickly passing, they basically are tortured, tortured. And King describes in detail what that looks like in detail, from the burning of the skin to the eyes, and it's very graphic, it's very gruesome, it's brutal, and it's horrifying. It's horrifying. But I think the point of that scene is to really drive home the point that even when it's done well, quote unquote, the electric chair is still a horrible way to take someone's life. It is still a horrible way to take someone's life. So overall, this is definitely one of King's more emotional stories. It's very emotional. It's very personal. It's very emotional. It's a story of hope. It's a story of life, but it's also a story of horror and death. It's got so many things going on for it. It's touching. It's heartbreaking. If you've seen the movie and the movie made you cry, the book will make you cry even harder. This is a tearjerker. It is a tearjerker. And I am someone that has seen the movie, so I knew what was coming, and it still affected me. It still really affected me. At the end of the day, I think this is an amazing story. It is an amazing book. Just be prepared for some heartache, but I do think it's something that you should read because it's really impactful and it has a lot of great messages in it. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite Stephen King books of all time, but it's definitely it's definitely in the top 10, I think, right now. Definitely in the top 10 out of the 35 that I've read so far. This one is definitely towards the top of the pile. So that's my review on The Green Mile, a super great book, even though it's hard to read at times. Very, very, very emotional. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, you were rewarded with a sleeping Roscoe. Yeah, he's a little sleepy. Anyway, now it's time for you to tell me, have you read The Green Mile? Have you seen the movie? Did it affect you as much as it affected me? What did you like about it? What didn't you like? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff and more furry friends coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading. Can you say hi? Oh, big stretch. Oh, yes, big stretch. Thank you.